On Christmas Day 2025, as snow blanketed the steps of the Supreme Court, history was quietly made. In a landmark decision, the justices struck down the Trump administration's sweeping tariffs, sending shockwaves through the nation's capital and far beyond its borders. The court ruled that the president had overstepped constitutional authority, delivering a powerful reminder of the limits of executive power. The gavel's echo signaled not just a legal judgment, but a dramatic shift in the balance of power between the branches of government. The decision dismantles a core piece of the administration's economic policy, upending years of trade strategy and reshaping the landscape of international commerce. Wall Street reacted instantly, with markets fluctuating as investors tried to grasp the full implications. The president, once the architect of aggressive tariffs, now faced a new reality. At the heart of the case was a fundamental question. Could the president use the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, to impose broad tariffs on America's trading partners? The legal debate had raged for months, with constitutional scholars and lawmakers weighing in on both sides. Ultimately, the court sided with small businesses and state governments, reaffirming that Congress, not the president, holds the power to regulate taxation and foreign commerce. For many entrepreneurs and local officials, the ruling was a long-awaited victory, restoring a sense of stability and predictability to their operations. Billions in tariffs on imports from China, Mexico, and Canada were suddenly rendered unlawful. The decision opened the door to a wave of legal challenges and raised the prospect of massive refunds for businesses that had paid these taxes. The logistics of unwinding years of tariffs would prove daunting. Now, the Treasury Department faces the monumental task of repaying tens of billions collected from import taxes. Behind closed doors, officials scramble to assess the financial impact and develop a plan for restitution, knowing that the eyes of the business world are watching closely. The ruling brings immediate relief to global markets, with investors and trading partners breathing a cautious sigh of relief. Yet uncertainty lingers, as the scars of the trade war remain fresh, and questions about future U.S. trade policy persist. Diplomatic ties, strained by years of tariffs and retaliatory measures, may now begin to heal. The world watches closely to see whether the United States will return to traditional trade alliances, or chart a new, unpredictable course in global commerce. This moment marks a turning point for American economic leadership and the balance of power in Washington. A day when the foundations of trade, law, and democracy were tested, and the future was rewritten before the world's eyes. The tariffs began with President Trump invoking IEEPA in February 2025, citing drug trafficking as a national emergency. Initially targeting Mexico, China, and Canada, the administration soon expanded tariffs to nearly all imports, claiming the trade deficit was an economic threat. Tariffs ranged from 10% to 50%, catching businesses and partners off guard. The administration argued these were regulatory measures, not taxes, to sidestep Congress's authority. This aggressive use of IEEPA was central to Trump's economic nationalism, aiming to revive American manufacturing. The strategy made imports pricier, hoping to boost domestic production, but the sweeping policy sparked immediate legal challenges, setting up a showdown between the executive branch, the courts, and the global economic order. The vision of a revitalized U.S. industry came at a steep legal and economic cost. The tariffs faced swift and determined legal resistance from all corners of the country. Small businesses, importers, and even state governments quickly mobilized, arguing that the new trade barriers threatened their livelihoods and the broader economy. Across the nation, coalitions formed, uniting people who rarely found themselves on the same side of an issue. Their central argument was clear: the president had overstepped his constitutional authority. Protesters gathered outside courthouses while legal teams worked late into the night, preparing briefs that challenged the administration's sweeping use of emergency powers. The U.S. Court of International Trade became the first major battleground. After intense hearings, the court ruled against the administration, finding that the use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, was far too broad in this context. This landmark decision set a powerful precedent. Even in times of crisis, emergency powers have limits, especially when they threaten to override Congress's constitutional role in setting trade policy. The administration, refusing to back down, appealed the decision. But the Federal Appeals Court upheld the lower court's ruling, emphasizing that IEEPA was never intended to grant the president unlimited authority to impose tariffs at will. Still, the legal fight was far from over. The court allowed the tariffs to remain in place temporarily, giving the White House a narrow window to make its case before the Supreme Court. President Trump responded forcefully, warning that overturning the tariffs would destroy the U.S. economy. He framed the legal battle as nothing less than a fight for the nation's economic survival, raising the political stakes even higher. As the Supreme Court prepared to hear the case, the stakes could not have been higher. Billions of dollars in trade, the livelihoods of countless Americans, and the very balance of power between Congress and the president all hung in the balance. Around the world, governments, investors, and ordinary citizens watched anxiously. The outcome would not only shape U.S. trade policy, but also send a message about the limits of presidential authority in times of economic crisis. This legal battle would ultimately define the future of executive power in America's economic emergencies, setting a precedent for generations to come. The Supreme Court hearing in November 2025 was a high-stakes legal drama. The administration argued EPA gave the president power to impose tariffs in emergencies, warning of dire consequences if stripped of this authority. Opponents countered that Congress never intended to hand over its core power to tax and set tariffs. The justices focused on whether IEEPA truly authorized such sweeping tariffs, seeking a narrow ruling that preserved emergency powers but checked executive overreach. The courtroom tension reflected the real-world stakes for businesses, markets, and international relations. The outcome would shape not just trade policy, but the constitutional balance for years to come. During oral arguments, conservative justices joined liberals in questioning the administration's broad view of presidential power. Chief Justice Roberts pressed for limits, asking if a president could impose any tariff, for any reason, under IEEPA. Justices Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett echoed concerns about unchecked executive authority and Congress's traditional role in trade. Justice Barrett highlighted the practical chaos of refunding $90 billion in tariffs, showing the court's awareness of real-world fallout. The administration's lawyers struggled to define clear limits, failing to convince skeptical justices. Legal experts noted the conservative bloc's doubts signaled the administration's tariff policy was on shaky ground. The court's skepticism foreshadowed a major rebuke of executive overreach. The economic stakes were enormous. Tariffs had raised the average U.S. rate to levels unseen in decades, sparking heated debates in boardrooms and on Capitol Hill. For many, these tariffs were more than just numbers on a page. They represented a fundamental shift in how America engaged with the world economy, and the consequences rippled far beyond government policy. At stake was up to $1 trillion in trade, a staggering sum that touched nearly every sector of the economy. From electronics and automobiles to food and clothing, the impact of these tariffs was felt in every corner of American life, influencing prices, jobs, and the choices available to consumers and businesses alike. Striking down the tariffs would halve these rates, triggering a seismic shift for industries reliant on global supply chains. Companies that had spent years adapting to higher costs now faced a new reality, with opportunities for growth, but also fresh uncertainty about how to navigate rapidly changing trade rules. The government now faces the logistical nightmare of refunding $90 billion to importers, a process that could take years. This unprecedented task involves combing through mountains of paperwork, verifying claims, and ensuring that funds are distributed fairly, a bureaucratic challenge on a scale rarely seen before. The legal uncertainty had already rattled markets and stalled trade negotiations with the UK and EU. Investors watched nervously as stock prices swung wildly, and diplomats struggled to find common ground, unsure of what the new rules would mean for future deals. For businesses, tariffs created winners and losers. Some domestic producers benefited, enjoying a temporary edge over foreign competitors and seeing a boost in demand for their products. But many others faced higher costs and inflation, as imported materials and goods became more expensive. Consumers too felt the pinch, with everyday items costing more and some products disappearing from shelves altogether. Small and medium businesses were hit hardest, lacking resources to adapt. Many struggled to absorb the extra costs or pass them on to customers, leading to layoffs, closures, and tough decisions about the future. The Supreme Court's decision forces another round of adjustment as companies recalibrate to a post-tariff world. Executives and workers alike must rethink strategies, renegotiate contracts, and retool operations to stay competitive in a landscape that has shifted yet again. The ruling resets the rules for global trade and American industry, opening the door to new possibilities but also new risks. As the dust settles, the trillion-dollar question remains: who will benefit and who will be left behind in this new era of commerce? The trade war's impact was deeply personal for many Americans. Sarah Wells, a small business owner, faced a $20,000 tariff bill that forced her to halt operations and lay off staff. Iconic U.S. brands like Levi's and Tesla saw sales abroad plummet amid foreign boycotts and protests. American farmers lost key export markets as China and others retaliated, causing financial strain across the heartland. Government aid offered little comfort to families facing uncertainty. Consumers paid higher prices for everyday goods, with the tariffs acting as a regressive tax. The promise to protect American jobs often translated to higher costs at the checkout counter. The trade war's hidden costs touched nearly every household and business. Experts say the Supreme Court's ruling is a major defeat for the administration, but not the end of presidential trade powers. The decision was narrowly focused on WIPA. Other statutes could still allow targeted tariffs in true emergencies. Economically, the U.S. faces the challenge of refunding billions and renegotiating trade deals. Lower tariffs may mean cheaper goods, but also renewed foreign competition for some industries. The ruling reasserts Congress's authority over trade, potentially spurring lawmakers to clarify limits on executive power. Internationally, the U.S. has a chance to rebuild alliances and pursue new trade agreements. Yet the debate over protectionism versus free trade remains unresolved in American politics. The world is watching for America's next move. The Supreme Court's decision closes a turbulent chapter but opens a new one for America's economy and democracy. The immediate challenge: unwinding tariffs, processing refunds, and repairing diplomatic ties. The ruling is a constitutional lesson reaffirming the separation of powers and Congress's role in trade. Lawmakers must now craft policies that balance swift crisis response with constitutional safeguards. For businesses and consumers, lower prices may bring relief, but competition will intensify for some industries. The debate over open markets versus protectionism will continue to shape America's future. This is a moment to reflect on the nation's economic direction and global role. The path forward depends on choices made by leaders, and by all Americans.